Hey, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Well, Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. And best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. I love it for the simple fact that it brings the sponsors to you. You don't have to search for them, and they distribute it to all the major platforms for you. So if you want to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start. Again, anchor.fm/START to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. And that's it. Let's go.
Allow me to reintroduce myself. Now tuned into the greatest.
Welcome, everyone, to the last episode of 2019 of the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute podcast. And yes, today is Tuesday, December 31st, 2019. And the great part of today is the fact that we're walking into a new year. And today, I'm going to do a couple of new things. And these things deal with the incorporation of a couple of charity ads that I've done. So be on the lookout for them. They will be during this episode. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do something else that's also a little different. I'm going to talk about something that's probably going to make people a little uncomfortable. Not a lot, but a little bit. I'm going to use verbiage that's, outside even my norm. Because I'm going to talk about the context of law in a manner that I don't usually deal with it in. And one of the things that I'm going to venture into today is an essence of deeper thought. I'm going to ask a couple questions. I want you to think about those questions. I actually want you to answer those questions because you chose today to sit down and listen to this old groggly voice and wonder what it is that I can actually add for you. Well, in this closing 2019 episode, I want to make sure I give you some more food. I want to make sure this is your holiday treat. I want to make sure I give you something that is a closeout banger. But today's episode comes from the movie Just Mercy. Because what I'm going to talk about today is our perfect system. And when I talk about our perfect system, I'm talking about our legal system. Yes, our perfect legal system. Because just like Just Mercy, it stars Michael B. Jordan and Jamie Foxx. And it's basically speaking on the death row inmates and the woefully flawed public pretender system. And yes, I didn't say defender, I did say pretender. Because one of the things we talk about is most people will acknowledge that our legal system is flawed. Why? Because Lady Justice is looking. Because there is a human factor to all of this. I'm going to say that one more time. There is a human factor to every instance of justice. And I constantly talk about how due process is subjugated on the cooperation of the supposed or alleged good guys. That never happens. And I also talk about the simple fact that police officers get it wrong 2/3 of the time. So in a system that we know is flawed, we know police officers get it wrong 2 out of every 3 times they do something. Every time they commit an act, or every time they do an arrest, every time they bring somebody in, every time they have a quote-unquote suspect, 2 out of every 3 times they're wrong. And we also know that they're not taught law. They're taught statutes, codes, and ordinances, which are designed not only to intimidate, but to generate revenue. They're going to intimidate and generate. Those are the things that they are trained to do. Which is why I tell people often, don't hold court in the street, because at the end of the day, you're talking to someone that you know that has been shown through Supreme Court rulings that they're not hiring anyone with high IQs. So we know they're not hiring deep thinkers. They're not hiring people that are very learned in anything. So the person that you're encountering on the street, probably not that smart. So to have a conversation and to get deeper than necessary with someone that, in trying to prove your side to someone that has no clue what you're talking about, is kind of stupid. But today, we're going to get into a point of uncomfortability. I think I said that correct. If not, Dia get me right. Anyway, because today, when we talk about the death row inmates, because that's what this movie was about. Michael B. Jordan played the Harvard attorney that started a movement, for the most part, and set up something that's similar to the Innocence Program. And he went out strictly to help death row inmates. And one of his first success stories was the young man that Jamie Foxx played. He was a man that was wrongfully convicted for some things that I'll get into, because that's where we're going to get into the point of being uncomfortable. That's where we're going to get into the point of some of the things that I'm saying is not going to be right on par with what I normally speak about. So I want you to get prepared for that. I want you to start thinking about, where could I go with this? I want you to think about what it is that you can do to set forth change within our legal system. Here's that first commercial.
While every shelter pet is unique, some love a good game of fetch. Others would rather snuggle together on the couch. However, there is one thing they all have in common. They're all pure love. Right now, millions of pets in shelters and rescue across the country are waiting to be adopted. There are several shelters that are overrun right now by abandoned and stray animals. You have an opportunity to show your love to someone else. If you're thinking about getting a pet this holiday season, make sure to visit shelterpet.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, Meds Fund, and the Humane Society of the United States. And remember, you're not the only one that can be a gift. And you should not only be getting gifts for just you. Pets can be a gift for you.
All right, welcome back. Now, I'm going to get into a couple of things, and one of the things I want to reflect on is many people speak on the imperfections of our legal system, and at the same time accept the fact that our legal system in itself has absolutions for solutions. Now, if we're going to speak on the imperfection of something, we're going to speak on the human error factor. We're going to speak on the things of getting it wrong more often than not. But we're also going to speak about the fact that we want divinity in a solution. Now, one of the things that I hate, because I come across this a lot, is the fact that everybody needs a villain. They need somebody to blame for what's going on with them. They need somebody to blame for something that's happened. And a lot of times, the first person that they catch that is unwilling to fight, that's the guy they want. Because you are willing to fall into a box. Because I say it more often than not, the police officers that we encounter, that we have, that are trained, they are not trained to solve issues. They are trained to intimidate and generate revenue. That's it. They're not trained to go out and do detective work. They're not trained to solve problems. And I like to give you a story, so I'm going to give you one. Now, I'm going to go back to, I believe it was 2011. I was staying in a hotel on Godby Road in Atlanta because I was going to a trial. One of my hearings in Atlanta. So I decided just to stay up there for a couple of days. Well, in this instance, there was a young lady. I'm going to say she was an exotic dancer. And her boyfriend, they were staying in a couple rooms down from me. Now, I leave out at about 7, 8 o'clock to go get something to eat. Well, when I come back, because the young lady, she left and she walked wherever she walked to, but we left around the same time. And when I come back, there's an ambulance there, there's police officers there. They've got the hotel, for the most part, blocked off. Her boyfriend, or young man that she was with, had gotten into an argument. And at that point, he had taken his own life. He had done this in the hotel. So, fast forward, this young lady comes back to the hotel. She finds out what happened. They give her another room. And, pretty much that's the end of it. Well, the next morning, probably about 9, 10 o'clock-ish, I walk outside because I hear a lot of yelling and sobbing, and I'm being nosy. That, I can't even say it any other way. I was being nosy. So I walk outside, and this young lady, this exotic dancer, she's outside, and there's a detective that is standing in front of this young woman, screaming at her. Now, keep in mind, this young lady, she had just lost someone I'm guessing she loved. So she's already distraught. Now someone that's supposed to be helping her is screaming at her. He's saying things to her that are very demeaning. He's saying things to her in a manner of accusing her of causing his death. So me being who I am and noting the situation, because at this point I only had bits and pieces of it. But the bits and pieces I had was enough for me to actually interject myself into that foolishness. And my interjection was, darling, do not even have a conversation with him. I said, because at the end of the day, if he wants to do some detective work, he can actually do some detecting. So he decides to now walk downstairs where I was, and he decided that he wanted to get in my face because he also was a big guy. He was about 6'3". He was about 230. It'd have been a nice little tussle. But in the midst of doing that, he goes, why would you tell her not to talk to me? My question to him was, why would you accuse her of something that you know for a fact that she didn't do? And he got quiet. And in the means of doing that, I asked him, if she's asking you a question, why is it that you are having an issue answering her? And he said, because I don't have to answer her. I then quoted to him the actual section in the Georgia State Constitution that states he is amenable to the public at all times because it was his fiduciary duty, because his job is to work towards the benefit of the public. And I told him, I said, hell, I can pull it up on my phone if you like. Well, his tone changed. And in the midst of his tone changing, he looks at me and goes, if someone had murdered you, would you not want us to solve it? And would you not want people to talk to us? I looked him straight in his eye and I said, no, I sure would not want anybody talking to y'all. And I told him, because you guys are scientists. Y'all create a hypothesis about whatever the hell is supposed to be going on, and then you find evidence to fit your hypothesis. Y'all aren't out trying to solve cases. You're trying to close cases. So no, I would not want anybody talking to you because you're not trained to solve anything. And I told him, case in point, your actions right now. How's that solving anything? Yelling at someone that you know for a fact was not there. Having a confrontational situation with someone and attempting to charge them with something you know they didn't do. How is that working towards her benefit? And he got quiet. But then here's the great part about that. That is my point. That is it in a nutshell. He was willing to charge a woman he knew was not guilty of anything other than having an argument with someone that had a weak mind and decided that they were going to take their life. For whatever reason, whatever he was going through, it is what it is. And at that point, he wanted to charge that young lady with that young man taking his life. And he knew she didn't have anything to do with it. But he was comfortable with that. And he was willing to go home and sleep and have a comfortable rest from that. But this is the system that we want to trust absolutions to. How is that not showing flaws? How is that not showing that they are not outdoing the things that they've sworn to God to do? They've taken an oath to do. They've written their John Hancock on and is choosing willfully not to do. How is that something we should trust with an absolution? And today, I want you to think about that. Because whether you're for the death penalty or not for the death penalty, if you're for it, what are you for? Are you for the proof that this person actually did it? Or are you wanting the death penalty because that's the person that was arrested for it? But keep in mind, it's wrong 2 out of every 3 times. And here's that next commercial, so be on the lookout. Think about that during this break.
I know many of us will be out celebrating with our family and friends during this holiday season, but I want you to remember, buzzed driving is drunk driving. And if you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. There are over 10,000 people lost their lives due to impaired driving fatalities in 2017 and 2018. Enjoying a night out and finding yourself oversharing or taking too many selfies? If the answer is yes, then you're noticing your buzz warning signs. When you spot a buzzed warning sign, call a cab, a Uber, Lyft, or a friend when it's time to go home. Just don't drive. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Now, I have to ask the question again. In this instance, I'm asking the question today, how can anyone be okay with executing, taking the life of anyone in a system that has the inability to apologize for wrongful convictions, Brady cops, and cherry-picking prosecutors at every level of justice lying and fabricating evidence? How can we accept absolution when we know the system itself is flawed because of human error? We know 2/3 of all death row inmates that have been released. I'm going to say that one. 2/3 of all death row inmates that have been released have been exonerated because of faulty attorney representation. Lack of DNA evidence, because they're showing that these people could not have possibly committed these crimes. Now, I'm going to give you one, and it was actually just brought up again within the last 2 years, because there was a group of 5 children, to say the absolute least. 5 children. They were deemed the Central Park 5. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because of who was pushing an agenda, who was asking for something, and how the police got it wrong. And then even today, 2019, most of the participants, knowing they were wrong, refused to apologize. Now, the reason that this became such headline news was because Donald Trump wanted these 5 children executed for the attack on a young lady in Central Park. Now, these 5 children, 14, 15, 16 years old. All of them were minorities. All of them were poor. Donald Trump took out full-page ads asking for their execution. And the craziest part about this whole thing, these young men were convicted. They were lied to by the police. They were interrogated for 18 plus hours without food and water. They were told things that were not possibly going to happen. And then, all of a sudden, they're checked for DNA, and it's no way their DNA matches. There's another man that's in prison that was described at the scene. His DNA matched. He confessed. These 5 men now are released from prison. But they spent years, I think 2 of them spent almost a decade of their life in prison for something they did not do, something that they were lied to about, and then something that they were forced to confess to. And the system was wrong. And then when asked, because there was a man that confessed to the crime, there was a man whose DNA matched the crime scene. There was a man that gave details that only the killer would know or the attacker would know. Donald Trump took out another full-page ad asking for the execution of these 5 boys. But DNA proved they were innocent. The confession of the man that actually committed the crime proved they were innocent. They were exonerated for the most part. They were let out of prison because they were innocent. And Donald Trump still wanted them executed because he didn't care about that. That was his, I don't care about the DNA evidence. So even years later, 2016, there's a documentary that comes out. And it talks about all those at every level that was involved in it and the tactics that they used, the things that they did, the things that was said to these children. Keep that in mind. They were children when this happened. And now Donald Trump says he wouldn't change anything. He still believed they were guilty. What? You have DNA and a confession, and all of that matches the crime, but you still want someone else executed for it so you can feel comfortable. Not because they're guilty, but because you want comfortable. And the craziest part about this whole situation is the prosecutor, she said she was right. The police officers said they did the right thing. Donald Trump believes he was doing the right thing. But they were all willing to sleep tight at night, executing innocent people for a crime they did not commit. And that's the thing that we have that we go on. Because even in this instance, there are several people that we can't reverse their convictions. We can't reverse their actions. We can't reverse the death penalty. And I'm going to give you a few names. Carlos Delano in Texas, convicted 1983. He was executed in 1989. That's super fast. Texas got a speedboat going on in here. But he was probably innocent. Ruben Conte, Texas, convicted 1985, executed 1983. Probably innocent. Larry Griffin, Missouri, convicted 1981, executed 1995, probably innocent. Joseph Odell, Virginia, convicted 1986, executed 1997, probably innocent. Florida, Leo Jones, David Spencer, Gary Graham, Claude Jones, Cameron Todd Willingham, Troy Davis. And I'm going to talk about Troy Davis because Troy Davis is someone that I actually had an opportunity to have interactions, not directly with him, but people that was in that situation. And I'm going to talk deeper about him. And he was executed in 2011. And here's where one of the things that really opened my eyes, but I'm going to get back to him. Because we still have Lester Bauer, Brian Terrell, Richard Masterson, Robert Pruitt, Carlton Michael Gary, Dominique Ray, Larry Swearingen, and those two were executed in Texas and Alabama this year. They were probably innocent. Here's the question. How can you now say, I'm sorry? That was more than a dozen people just rattled off that were executed in a system that we know is flawed. They were probably innocent. But we have a system that can't apologize, but wants an absolute solution because that's our perfect system. That's the system we want to be happy with. That's also the system that we're okay with that makes mistakes. What about when that mistake takes a life? Because if I was to go out right now and accidentally shoot somebody in the face with my gun, that's manslaughter at best. And do I get to say, oops, my bad? No, I gotta sit down sometime. But how does the state sit down? How do they apologize? How do we get to the next space because of their mistake? We can't give these people back their life. We can't take them to a place that says, you know what? My bad. I'm sorry. Because we're in a perfect system that can't apologize, that we know is flawed at every level because of human error, but it wants an absolute definitive solution. Think about that as we go into our last commercial. Welcome back, everybody. And let me continue. Because one of the things, we were talking about were public pretenders. Now, we all know that they are advocates for the state, not for the actual people that they're defending. Because when we look at the public defender system, many of them are, all of them are overworked because everything in life is a crime and they work directly for the prosecution and have no desire to present a defense, nor a desire to win a case. Now, before I go deeper into that, I'm going to give you an example. I had a friend of mine. He was charged with murder. I had went to his trial several times, and I noted that every time I went there, a continuance was allowed. So I was wondering why they kept allowing these continuances. So when I leaned over and I spoke to my friend's attorney, he stated, the state doesn't have all their witnesses. My response was, why are you waiting on the state? You have to allow the continuance. The defense is the one that allows for continuances. So keep that in mind. He stated that he was looking for the best opportunity to confront them. My response was, if you don't do your job properly, I'm going to take over the case. The very next time out, they allowed the same continuance. My friend fired that public defender. I took over his case. I filed 12 motions with the prosecution. They immediately went to backtracking because what I asked for was things they didn't even give the public defender. And in the stuff that they did give the public defender was the fact that the eyewitness testimony stated that the person that had committed the murder was between 5'4" and 5'7". My friend was 6'2". I'm going to say that again. 5'4" and 5'7". My friend was 6'2". These are things that they allow to go on, and these are the reasons you have to fight back. Because again, they were looking to put this young man in prison for a murder that nobody witnessed him commit. I'm going to say that one more time. They were willing to put this young man in murder, have him sitting in jail for something he did not do. And they were all okay with that until they saw someone that was not part of their system, that was not part of their culture, that was not a part. I wasn't one of the piranhas in there. I was a piranha eater. That's when they changed their mind. When they saw that the fight back was real. When they saw they had real opposition. Because it's about revenue. It's not about law. Nobody cares about equal justice. None of that is being done or even sought for when you're talking about the Prison Reform Act, because it's absolute bullshit, because it doesn't help anybody that's in prison, nor does it solve the population problem where we're having more than 840,000 people that have yet to be convicted of a crime sitting in jail waiting to be sentenced. When we have 2.1 million people. I'm going to say that one, 2.1 million people in our prison systems. We have more than 2 million people getting citations every month throughout this country. It's not about law and order. It's about revenue generation. So you're either part of the fight to stop this foolishness, or you're paying them and condoning their actions. And these types of things happen. And again, it's a flawed system, but you're telling me it's okay to have absolution when you know that even in this case, this young man would have sat in prison for probably most of his life had someone not decided to fight back with him. Because at the end of the day, when you're looking at these public defenders, a lot of them are getting these cases right before trial. In the instance of my racketeering trial, my punk-ass brother got his attorney the day before we started Wadir, which is picking the jury. I'm going to say that one more time. The day before. There's no way in a 24-hour period she could put in 100 hours of work that is required for the case. Because 100 hours of work is 2.5 work week. 2.5 weeks of work of 40 hours. There is no way that can happen. So they're not allowing time for there to be a proper defense. And even in just that case, do you think they're putting the 2.5 weeks time period or the 100-hour time period that's required for a proper defense? Do you think they're putting that in on each and every case? Do you think they're putting that in on any case? Because that's what we're having. And that's why we have such things as the improper convictions. Almost each and every appeal that contains a public defender is allowed to be retried on appeal for ineffectiveness of counsel because they cannot put in the time that's required. And here's the greater thing, because I did a video where I was telling you guys everything that you do, all your instructions for your public pretender needs to be done in writing. Everything that you give your attorney needs to be done in writing. It needs to be set out
Why? Because if they're not following your instructions, they're not working towards your benefit. Because keep in mind, you are the employer because you are the one paying them. I'm going to say that one more time. You are the employer. You are the one paying them. So you are the one that gives instructions. You don't sit there and wait for them. You tell them what direction to move. You are the one that is head of that business. The business is you. And here's the great part about that. Because when I gave you that case, I talked about if they did not follow your instructions, that automatically sets up grounds for them to be liable. That automatically overturns the suits that you may or may not have. That may or may not overturn your conviction. These are the things that are found in these death row cases. And even in the movie, he spoke about Strickland v. Washington. And Strickland v. Washington 466 U.S. 668, 1984 case, where it established the standard for determining a criminal defendant's Sixth Amendment right to counsel is violated by the counsel's inadequate performance. Because, again, the reason they point that out is, again, these people are on death row. They had a public defender. And here's the greatest part about that. The ruling held to obtain relief because of ineffectiveness of counsel, a criminal defendant must show both that the counsel's performance fell below an objective standard of reasonableness and that the counsel's deficient performance gives rise to a reasonable probability that if counsel had performed adequately, the result of the proceeding would have been different. Here's the easy. They're not going to present all evidence that's available to them. Why? Because most of them don't even know it's there, or two, they don't care. Three, they're not going to be able to put in the time that's required to set up the offense, so they're not going to mount a defense. They're going to tell you, hey, you need to plead to this. You need to plead to that. I've even seen one where the day before they even spoke to their client, they offered their client a plea. Didn't hear anything. Didn't hear the story. Didn't even read anything from the police, but offered a plea. Those things are grounds for appeal. Those things are grounds to overturn a conviction because those things are ineffectiveness of counsel. And in many of the eyes, before they even do anything, you're guilty until proven innocent. But they aren't going to help you prove it because they're just a cog in a machine. They push plea bargains, just like I just said, and scare tactics from the prosecution because they themselves are programmed to believe that they are doing the right thing because you are already guilty because you were arrested. They themselves believe they are doing the right thing because you were arrested. Because it's not about law. It's not about truth. Because here's one song that comes to my mind whenever I hear about that. There was a song back in my day. Young man said, if you want the truth, go to church. I know it hurts. Because the truth is not found in the justice system. The truth is not found in the court system. The truth is not found in the legal system. Because no one cares about the truth. Because there's no money in the truth. There's nothing in the truth other than getting your point across. But if you're not willing to stand for the truth, you're willing to not be inconvenienced. You're willing to tell them what they're doing is okay. You lost your right to complain about what they're doing because you're supporting it. And the 95% of people support their actions. I'm going to say that one more time. 95% of people support their actions. Why? Because only 5% of people actually stand up and say, you know what? I'm not working for you. I'm not giving you any money. And here's the crazier part. Because they're wearing a nice suit and tie. Because they're wearing a nice slack or dress suit. You're programmed to believe what they're wearing symbolizes that they are the ones that have authority. You're programmed to believe what they're saying is true. You are programmed to believe that what they're saying is right and just. I'm going to say that one more time. You're programmed to believe them simply because what they're wearing. That's why a lot of times people look at me and they're like, man, I love your information, but you're giving it to me in a t-shirt. I knew when I started it was going to be a difficult road for anybody to believe anything I was saying. But the great part about it is anybody can look up what I'm saying. That's where I stand. Because that, regardless of who I am or what it is I am, what it is I'm wearing, I allow you to believe me because you can go and look at what I'm talking about and you don't have to take my word for it. Those are the things that we need to be standing on. Those are the things that we need to be fighting for. Those are the things that need to be making the difference in our lives. We do not need to continue going down a road where we know what the end is. The end is you're working for them. The end is the modern day slavery. Because whether you're giving time or money, you're giving them something that deals in profit. You're working for them. They're taking food out of your children's mouth. They're taking away your American dream from moving forward. Because let's say, just like I gave up the example, when you stop fighting back, that becomes habit evidence. Just like when you're accused of something, the first time you cut that check because you don't feel like being inconvenienced, everybody's going to expect you to cut that check next time. But here's the thing. My habit evidence shows I'm going to fight back. Because just like my brother told me one day, and it was funny as hell to me, because he said, you're going to have to get Jesus and 12 other people to say, I did it. Because I even subscribe to the Steve Harvey method. He said, I don't give a shit if you have a video of me with my social security number tattooed on my ass. You still going to have to get 12 people to say I did it. And these are the things that I want us to actually become more conscious of. Because the system preys on the poor and the uneducated. They force medicate you in elementary school and label you mentally incompetent. Because that is the one thing that we fight for in our court systems each and every day. Because we actually have to get permission to represent our own interests. Because we have to prove that we're competent. And most of us have no idea what the competency test is for each state that we're in. Most of us don't even know that. Because here's the great part about it. Because proving your competency allows them to cover their ass. Because anytime your liberty is at stake, they must, I'm going to say that again, they must provide you with adequate counsel. A lot of times that's not what's done. And even in that, the great part about what we're doing right now is we're allowing you to build competency. When I was asked, what made me competent to represent my own interests? My response is, I got a driver's license. And she goes, is that all? I laughed. I said, okay, well, no. I've passed the Georgia real estate exam twice. I've passed multiple Georgia insurance exams. And I said, if you like, I can continue to go on. And she said, oh, no, that is well enough. Because most people don't understand those are two of the most difficult tests in the state of Georgia. That doesn't even mean I didn't have other things that showed my competency, my latency for understanding what the law is. Didn't even have to go into the other stuff that I have. You know, because I could have dropped the Six Sigma. I could have dropped the Series 6. I could have dropped some other stuff because those are the things that I have done. Those are the things that allow me to be competent in what I'm doing. My actions showed I was competent in what I was doing. So just understand that. That's what we're fighting for. Because if you're taking something that alters your mind state, because it doesn't matter what drug it is, it can actually be caffeine. Caffeine alters your mind state. Any drug that alters your mind state questions your competency. So just understand that. When we're talking about force medicating our children, we're telling them it's okay to label our child as something other than what they are. Because back in the day, if there was a child that was active, we had this thing called a belt. Now they don't want you to discipline your child. They want to do it. You had a child that couldn't sit still. They had this stuff called recess, so where they can burn off injuries. Why? Because a child cannot sit still. That's just not happening. And here's the greater part about that. When you allow them to medicate your child, you're allowing them to say your child is incompetent. You're allowing them to say that your child is below the level of average. You're allowing them to say that child is going to be a ward of state because that child can't think for itself. That child is not disciplined enough to make the decisions necessary to live life properly. It may not seem that deep, but it is that deep. Because now, every time that child goes before a tribunal, every time that child goes before a court system, every time that child does anything, their mental state will come into question and they will go in as something less than what they are. And they're going to continue that fight for the rest of their life. And here's the greatest part about when you're dealing with someone that is mind altered or mind limited through some type of chemical. I told you about the Reed method. And I also discussed interrogation techniques and tactics. The Reed method is designed to coerce. It's designed to be deceptive. It's designed to confuse you. And then they'll do things like give you a soda, give you some coffee. Why? Because again, I told you caffeine is mind altering. Caffeine makes it to where you can't shut up. It makes it to where if you're one of those people that have to tell your side, that you have to prove something to somebody else, you're going to give them everything they need to go against you. And it's easier to convince you. And now I'm going to go to another one, because you look at Rodney Reed's. There was a countrywide uproar about his execution. It was stopped by an appeals court for the introduction of new evidence. Now, understanding that is rare. Rarely is an execution stopped for the introduction of new evidence. And generally, when that new evidence is made available, it's not accepted because it's tied to other evidence that have to be linked in a certain manner. But when you're dealing with just the new evidence, it's difficult to make that link. Because if you can't make that link, the trial itself becomes void for the most part. It's just a show. The thing in this case is very similar to the movie. Because Rodney Reed, as well as the young man that Jamie Foxx played in the movie, Just Mercy, began with the relationship of a black man and a white woman and a scorned husband. In both cases, these men were picked out because they were having relations with someone's wife, and the husband had a little bit of pull. And then the husband goes out and does things and alerts his friends on what's going on, and his friends take actions that are beyond the scope of law. They put men in jail, in prison, on death row because they got hung up on sex for the most part. Because that's about as polite as I'm going to be today. But I'm going to go back because I told you I was going to talk about Troy Anthony Davis. He was convicted of the murder of Mark McPhail. And I apologize if I said the name incorrectly. And it happened on August 19th, 1989. He was not executed until September 21st, 2011. Now, here's the craziest part of this case. There were 34 witnesses presented by the prosecution against Troy. 7 of them stated they saw Troy shoot the security guard. Or they saw Troy shoot Mark. 2 stated Troy confessed to them he had committed the murder. Now, here's how our perfect justice system works. No murder weapon was found. And ballistics report showed the gun used to kill Mark was also used in another shooting. Now, so they have a gun that killed the officer. Well, actually, they don't have the gun. They have bullets that said that the ones that were in the officer was used in another shooting. But they don't have the gun. They searched Troy for years, for the most part. Never found the gun. He was convicted. Now, the craziest part about this is there was another hearing. 7 of the 9 people, because remember, 7 said they saw him, 2 said he confessed to him. 7 of those 9 recanted their original testimony, as well as named a new person, Sylvester Red Coles, as the person they saw or had confessed to them. They gave another name. Now, I'm going to give you a little deeper information because I was actually in Georgia at this time, because remember, this is right before my trial. The thing is, it wasn't just these 7 of those 9. There was actually 15 people that came forward and said the officers had made them, forced them, coerced them to sign statements and testify to seeing Troy. 15. There was a total of 15 people. Now I think you remember that. 34 witnesses presented testimony against Troy. 7 of the 9 changed their testimony. 15 in total said they were coerced by police to testify in the behalf of the state against Troy. All of them said that they had lied or was forced to say what they had said by police. You know, the good guys, the part of our perfect system. This young man, they had no murder weapon. They had recanting witnesses. They had no solid evidence linking Troy to this murder or even the location. Troy never confessed to the murder. And I think if you watch Just Mercy, didn't that sound a little familiar? Because this is where I was talking about it gets uncomfortable. This is where, when you hear people talking about it's a disproportionate number of blacks, for lack of a better word, that are incarcerated. Because when you have 13% of the population, and they make up 40% of your incarcerated, that is not humanly possible without targeting. That is not possible without making shit up. That is not possible without direct links to, you know what, I can't tell them apart, so he did it. And then you link it to they're not fighting back because they're scared. Because even in the movie, Jamie Foxx's character did not want to fight back because he was scared. At no point did the mindset of the people in that town changed until something happened. Because all of them walked along in fear. Because that is what the system is designed to do. Create chaos, create panic, create fear. And for my biblical folks, I'm going to let y'all figure out who that represents. I'm gonna let you do that. I'm not gonna say it. I want you to understand what and who that represents. Who brings chaos and fear? What brings chaos and fear? Is that a good thing? But we ain't gonna go into that because that ain't what I do. But we're gonna go into something else. But I want you to keep your mind on that. Because again, these people are the ones that we are tagging as the good guy. These people are the ones that we are saying are infallible. Because the system itself will not apologize. The system itself is flawed because of that human contact, human error. But then we want absolution. Now, 2/3 of all people released from death row have similar stories. Convicted in an imperfect system that wants absolution. I went through a list of over a dozen people that was executed, including Troy Davis, that was more than likely innocent. But the system can't even apologize for that because they didn't care about the innocence of the person. They dealt on recouping fear. They dealt on income generation because that's what it's about. They want revenue. They don't give a shit about the life. And in that absolution, it is absolved from making an apology for its own wrongs. I love you guys. I appreciate you listening. Tune in. 2020 is going to be an enormous year for us, and we're going to keep it moving. We're going to keep it growing. We're going to keep it going. Thank you guys for continuing to donate. PayPal is back in play, and I want you all to know bigger things are coming. More consistent episodes are coming on a daily, and we are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger every day. So, love you guys. See you next podcast.
I'm gonna show you how great I am.